Hello and welcome back to the Radio Gamescast. As always, I am your host Ryan. Today I'm joined by my lovely cohort of co-hosts, Alex.
Hi.
And hey Wyatt, what you got over there?
Oh, me? Oh, nothing. I'm here. I'm present.
Looks like you're having maybe a play date with yourself over there?
Never say that again.
That sounded weirder than I thought it would.
You know what?
We're mentioning the Playdate video game console.
Let's cancel the bit for a second. We're talking about this thing. We're not talking about whatever the heck Ryan's talking about. All right, let's calm down.
All right. It's the podcast episode where we're just going to talk about normal stuff because we've all got very busy schedules this week, and I didn't have time to plan a more involved topic. So let's jump in because I think we have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Alex, you and I have been playing a lot of Destiny.
Yep.
And I want to get this conversation out of the way first, so that Wyatt.
I'm gonna get my hand sanitizer.
Yeah, so that Wyatt is free for the rest of the podcast since he doesn't play or enjoy talking about Destiny. But I want to mention Destiny 2 because they've done a thing in Season of the Wish that makes me very angry, and I'm curious what you're gonna think because I actually like Season of the Wish's storyline very much. And I also want to say I think Destiny 2 is in the best spot it's been in a very long time. Outside of like Lightfall being a relatively disappointing expansion, I think like the current state of Destiny is extremely fun to play.
Disappointing year. Really good stories as far as the seasons go, and then
cool seasonal activities.
They finally got around to being able to be more creative and inventive with the seasonal events and things like that.
Yeah, and Into the Light, great thing for the game. Biggest problem with Into the Light is going away in a week, or in a couple weeks. I only say a week because I'm traveling and will not be able to play it in a week. But
that and the whole like boss rush Pantheon mode is only available for 5 weeks, and that's just gone forever.
Yeah,
too.
People are really liking lots of weird stuff with like timing.
I have an important question. How much of the content from this season is going to be vaulted? Like,
so
let's take
Into the Light is not.
How long is it going to take until all the content that's been added is just wiped?
So they've
never happened.
Largely stopped doing that, aside from the season-specific stuff, which is what I'm about to mention. And a lot of that still comes back. Like the exotic missions are now on a rotator, so they come back every now and then, and you get to play through them again.
We got Whisper. We're getting a 0
Onslaught,
hour
which is a really cool
this Tuesday.
There's a new horde mode that I think you would actually like a lot, Wyatt, called Onslaught, which is basically like you build a tower defense-y thing while you're doing a horde mode. And it's like somewhere between casual and more mid-core gameplay levels. Like it can get kind of hard, but it's not too hard. It's super enjoyable mode. That's sticking around. Super cool guns, too. That mode has awesome rewards that are also staying around. Slightly less like chance to get the good stuff afterwards because this is kind of like a boosted event right now, but after that it's still there. But there's a couple caveats I want to mention with this because I'm playing through the seasonal storyline for Season of the Wish because I took a big break of Destiny after Season of Deep through Season of the Witch, so I didn't play the Witch stuff and only played the Deep stuff, which means I've given up on finishing the Season of the Witch storyline, but I want to finish Season of the Wish because it's kind of cool. It's going through and it's like all about Riven and whatnot and how to get to the final shape, which is a bunch of nonsense to anyone that doesn't play this game. But the reason I want to mention this is I'm having fun going through the story, and I think it's actually quite well done narratively. But there's a couple problems that keep rearing their head in Destiny's story, and a new one that happened with Season of the Wish. And maybe you can tell me, Alex, if this is a thing in the other seasons that I missed. Which is requiring hard content to do story completion. I'm really curious if this is like a thing that started recently or not.
They have not had you do that before. You could always do like the base level of like back with Season of the Deep, the base level of deep dives and things. You didn't like have to purposely seek out the exotic mission after getting all the exotic fish and things like that for the story.
So I want to specify this
it was base level difficulties.
I've had a good time with it, and then I got to a point yesterday where Alex and I had to go run something called the Coil, which is sort of like a roguelite mode where you go through and like choose some buffs over a couple of runs. It gets pretty hard. It's definitely harder content. And the end point is you dying or hitting wave 4, I think we found out it was.
Yeah, limited amount of revives. You start off with 21, I think. Killing champions gets you more.
Yeah, and actually, I don't think there was we didn't even finish it. We just hit a point where we got all the rewards, and then we went through another round until we ran out of revives.
Yeah.
But cool idea. Not a mode that's very casual friendly. Definitely
God,
not
no,
a thing I would say is like a normal player's experience they want with the game. And I think it was fun doing it in a duo. We probably should have done it with 3 people. It does scale the player level. They require that to do part of the story. And it's pretty regular that they'll require you to do part of a seasonal mission or seasonal activity. But usually it's the relatively easy one, or if there's a harder one, it's not that hard. Coil was tough. Like, Coil is a thing that I think approaches proper dungeon to raid level of difficulty just by sheer numbers. You hit a point where you're like fighting enemies that are super buffed above your capabilities.
It starts at your actual light level, and then it goes up by 5 each loop, I believe,
and to be fair,
right?
you're getting buffs occasionally, but it can totally like outpace you at a certain point. Which I thought that was okay because it wasn't that long. Like, we didn't have to do a ton, and they didn't require that I complete it. They only required that I get a couple items from inside. So it would have been completed regardless, even if we failed. But then I got to the next quest objective after Alex had signed off for the night. And that was completing the exotic mission Star-Crossed, which is a way to get a new exotic bow, which is very cool. It's a cool bow that you shoot it and it like drops a trap occasionally that will tangle a bunch of things up. Very cool. Thematic, looks awesome. Great seasonal thing. I like the weapon so much that I'm planning to run with Alex later the legend version of this mission. The problem is, because it was part of the story, I assumed that it would be totally fine for me to do the regular version of this completely solo. And I think I had one of the most infuriating, like, 60 minutes of Destiny that I've ever had. Because this is a thing with, like, mechanics that you have to do. You have to, like, go stand on pads and get buffs and, like, have a limited time in areas, which mean that you have to do enough damage at certain points within, like, a 45-second window to kill many bosses. Which is
all the while ads are still
barrier.
Bombarding you completely.
While ads are spawning and everything's going on, and you're like buff timer's running out. There's a lot happening, and as a single player, that was probably too much to deal with. I should have just waited till the next day, but because I'm traveling soon, I want to get things done. I want to like do as much of it as possible each day, so I can sign it off before it goes away. So I brute forced it as a single player. And most of it was doable. Like, I could totally see how the vast majority of that mission was possible as a solo player. But then I realized, like, I'm running a raid loadout. Like, I'm running my raid gear to do this solo. And I'm like, what is a normal player's experience of this space gonna be if they're just running through this with, like, not raid optimized gear, not all this crazy stuff that we have because we do raids occasionally. Like, I'm like, this would be a moment where I stopped playing the season, were I a normal person. I was like, that sucks.
To be fair,
especially if you're just someone who's just starting and not into build crafting, you're fucked. You're not going to be able to get past that.
Like, yeah. To be fair to Bungie, it must be really difficult to kind of balance, like, hey, like the story content of our kind of semi-faux MMO thing is really important, but we also want to make sure that like solo players or people who are just in the story are like engaging with as much of the content as possible. So how far do you go with that?
And I want to say, as much as I'm complimenting the story, I'm not complimenting the storytelling. I think there's a difference. Like, the storytelling to me, I don't mean like the delivery and voice acting. It's all phenomenal. They do a great job. Even the presentation is super good. But the way that Destiny delivers story has become a bigger and bigger problem to me, because they will do this thing where you go talk to a character in one room of the ship that you're in. You'll then go talk to another character in a different room and like go back and forth like 1 or 2 times. Not that annoying, you know, but the way that they do these is the character will start speaking to you, and then their like voice acting will come through, and then if you click, a like panel will come up with text. And you would think in any other universe that would just be what they're saying, so you can read it. It's like a summary of what they're saying with different wording.
It's word for word a little bit, and then it goes off into a different tangent.
Then it will be like a summary of what's happening that's kind of confusing if you aren't listening to them, which is the worst of both worlds, because that means if I click it and I'm then reading the thing and hearing it, I'm not understanding either. Like, I'm missing both of them at that point, and not just
Also,
one or
you
the
can't
other.
walk away from the conversation too far to do other stuff while you're being expositioned at.
Which is why
because
I
the
bring this up.
voices have a they peter off if you get further away.
Which is why I bring this up, because I was playing Fallout 3 earlier, and Fallout 3 has audio logs that you pick up and play. And guess what happens when you play them? You can still walk around and do everything else. And I was like, I'm having a better experience with Fallout 3's audio logs, which is a game from 2010, maybe before that. Yeah, definitely before that.
Yeah.
Because Skyrim was 2011, and Fallout 3 came out far before that. So early
2007,
2000s.
2006.
Yeah. And I had a moment where I was like, I just wish I could do this while still doing other things. And that was like a big thing. But to get back to what I was focusing on here is the Legends, the Star-Crossed mission. I actually think it has a really cool mechanic that's probably fun in a fire team. The final boss of this mission is
awful way to enter a boss zone. That's just a kill. It's just a kill boss.
As a single player, is maybe the most infuriating single encounter that I've ever done in Destiny. Which is, you jump into a room, you get both buffs you need to see the boss and damage certain things. You run into the room. There's this obnoxious orange tent over the whole room, because that's sort of how they deal with this buff thing. And at that point, I'm just like, just give me the one other buff. I don't need the orange tent to tell me I can damage the boss, because I already can't do it unless I have the other buff. So you walk in, there's this orange tint over everything. It's the Taken and Vex, so they're spawning all these crazy like projectiles and things that cover your screen. So it's already visual vomit at this point.
Oh yeah, and with the Taken, they're enemies that if you don't kill them fast enough, they duplicate.
Yeah, and then they're spawning harpies, which shoot you from the sky repeatedly, and are tossing lasers everywhere. And for some reason, they just have more health than other harpies. I don't know why. I don't know if I was under light or something, which can't be possible because I have maxed out my light level. So I'm not sure what was happening in this situation. But there was like a moment there where I realized that this boss fight was going to be a Dormammu situation. Which was, I had to do this boss fight, and thankfully in the regular version of this mission, they do not require you to, like, they keep the boss damage if you die and everything, so it's not like a thing you have to play perfectly for. But it was so infuriating. It was the most infuriating thing I've done, where literally I was like popping out of my respawn, slowly running out of ammo, going into this room and shooting this boss, which is the annoying type of boss because it's spawning the goblins that have the beam that makes things invulnerable. So you then have to go kill those while you're also being shot at from everything else. And there's very little cover that you can use, especially as a solo player, because nobody's clearing ads except for you.
And the phalanx with the shields that can boop you out of said cover.
Legitimately, I think that is the single encounter that has made me the angriest of any Destiny thing. And particularly because I was really into it. Like, I was enjoying that mission up until that point pretty heavily, even though it was pretty hard doing it as a solo player. I was enjoying what I was doing. And then I hit that moment, it was like, this is so bad.
That is one of the worst
to
feelings
deal with.
That is one of the worst feelings you can have when you're really sucked into a game that you're playing, and then you're just unceremoniously just ripped straight out of it.
Because it reminded me of, like, suddenly there's like one area in Halo 3 where if you put on all the skulls, there's one spot where I think 4 hunters spawn at a single time with almost no cover.
Oh my god.
This was that moment to me. It was that like single area that has given me flashbacks of being just the worst thing to deal with. Was this, and like, man, I am
like,
glad
this is
that
what hell is
there. Yeah, we'll see if it's easier on the harder mode with 3 players, because I think we might be able to do it a lot less painfully in that, at least, of like not having to do the stupid running back in and out thing. But it is a terrible entrance to a boss arena where you're kill boxed into an area with no cover. Like, it's a thing they keep doing on certain missions. They did it on the new Legend Whisper mission that you can do. There's like a part where you enter the boss room that's just constantly booping
the
boop
ramp. Oh my god.
It literally, like, everything
and you can
spawns
get one
in these
shot by a
walls
flamethrower
and knocks you into things. And then every enemy is spawning and they're obnoxious and have flamethrowers, and you have to beat it in 20 minutes. So it's a very tight timer, and that mission is annoying. It's not awful. Like, it was doable, but it's just super annoying. And this was that to another degree, because I didn't have anyone else there. And the reason I bring this up and I'm like harping on it is because I want to know what the thoughts are on having this be like a required story thing. 'Cause it's a cool mission, but man, I wish that the game had like warned me you should bring a full fire team or something going
have
into
it
this,
be.
or like.
I think it's a really bad idea to have that be part of the story mission that you have to progress through. In season of the Defiant, the first season of this expansion.
Yes.
Where you could do where you could get the
Revision Zero
the Vexcalibur exotic glaive. That one, it's talked about very briefly in the main story. Like there's one sentence alluding to it. And it's not required for the seasonal story at all. But you can go and pursue that, and it's a nice little bit of extra story where you get to see
also
a
not
character.
Nearly as obnoxious. I think that's the real problem. Is this is a particularly tough exotic mission, which brings me back to thinking about the one that was in Season of the Seraph, which is I think Revision Zero.
Yeah, that's Revision
Zero.
That
mission was totally doable solo and super cool.
Yeah.
And even more fun in a fire
team.
Like,
it introduced you to raid mechanics too. It was perfect.
Like it's weird to me that they nailed that one, and that one wasn't. I don't think that was required. And maybe it was required to do it once on the normal difficulty. But it was totally doable. Like I did not remember having any problems with that. So
I think there was a modified version of it as the final mission.
Yeah, that's totally possible. But yeah, it's just weird to me that they're requiring this thing that is definitely harder, and I think is clearly tuned in a way that's very hard. And like, it's not a tuning problem from their side, because the season's been active for months. Like this has been the 7-month long season that I just didn't really play during.
Longest season they've had.
So it can't be a tuning problem that they fix because it's the end of the season. Like it's done. So this is what they wanted it to be at. And I think it's a mistake. I think it's just too much to throw into your average player.
I think especially in Destiny's case, and this is coming from someone who hasn't played in a while, but you have to be really careful about where you dole out your story content, because you already have some of it locked behind raids. At least that's how it was when I was still playing, right? Which is already like, you got to get people together, you got to get a group of people together, and then you have to go through a raid, and that usually takes you a good batch of attempts just to get more story content. And if you lock it more into really more difficult like events and stuff like that, you're like you run the risk of like segmenting it too much for people who just want to experience the story, you know?
Yeah, I think that's super fair. And I just wanted to mention that because I thought it was interesting. And aside from that, I've been having a really good time with Destiny lately. I'm very hopeful for the final shape, while also being cautious because of the state of Lightfall, I think, as everyone is.
Yep.
Because Lightfall was really a close to disaster when it launched, and then I think they pulled it back, but it was absolutely not well received. So
not to unduly hype things up, it's weird how Bungie keeps having these just absolute god awful bottom of the barrel type seasons, and then the best thing that you've ever seen gameplay wise. Like it happened in Destiny 1 with oh my god, what happened right before the Taken King. It happened in Destiny 2, where you had Warmind and the Curse of Osiris right before Forsaken.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a pattern that they've been following. I don't want to call this a bottom of the barrel season, because I think Wish is actually, like, the activity is kind of fun. I have problems with the fact that the traps are one-shot kills, but that's really the only thing.
I hate those spikes. I hate them so much.
What it feels like is that they have that really good expansion planned way in advance, and then they have to kind of fill out that time while they're working on it with other things, and that's just, they don't have as much time to kind of flesh out those like lesser seasons before you get to the really, really great stuff. That's just me kind of guessing at what might be happening, but it's kind of what it seems like.
Well, that's the thing with this one. The expansion itself, like, dogpiled on for a story and all that stuff. The seasonal story, like the writing behind it, is good. Like, they're good storylines. Maybe not delivered the best way, but it's interesting.
The story's good. The storytelling can have problems, but absolutely they're good, well written and well voice acted. So I'm really hopeful Final Shape pulls this together. And I think this is just like, this has also made me think more about their biggest problem just being the fact that these seasonal stories get vaulted. And I actually think for Wish it's kind of okay. Like playing through this, I'm like, I really like this story, but the way that they have you play it, where you're going back and forth between these activities, is just not super.
Oh yeah,
fun.
they also like reintroduced players having to go through the blind well, which is a piece of year 2 content that no one touches because you either don't understand the mechanics or it's like asininely simple.
They do
or
that
just
in my newest story step, and this is the one that prompted this discussion aside from the legend mission, the exotic mission, is go do an ascendant challenge, which I love the fact that that's a mission because ascendant challenges are a Dreaming City unique thing. Yeah. That's like a weird way to activate that you have to look up, and I'm just like,
yeah, they don't tell you about it in game at all. Once again, you have to get a specific item that's called a Queen's tincture of Queen's foil. You have to drink it. You have a 30-minute time limit.
You have a 30-minute timer. Yeah.
And there are these portals. That is one a week on a 6-week rotator that you have to find somewhere in the overworld of the Dreaming City. And if you die when you're doing the Ascended Challenge, it puts you back out of the portal. You have to do the whole thing over again.
Oh my god!
And this is required for the story.
is that as horrible as you're making it sound?
We'll find out because I haven't done it yet. I haven't done it yet.
I was with a guide, and like in this current year, when we're so many years past year 2, it's fine, if not a little annoying. To my understanding,
they're not hard. It's just weird that this is like an obtuse thing that they're having you do for no reason.
Is this is story related content, right?
Yep.
I have to do this to progress the season.
Mandatory to see the end.
If this was some like side quest or something, or like something you have to just like the community has to discover,
yeah,
that'd be kind of cool. Actually,
yeah, that could be a cool,
like a little side quest
where you're
or
bringing it back to all these past mechanics from year 2 and things like that.
Especially because this season is setting up like
mandatory.
This season's setting up important information for Final Shape. It's like how do you get into the Traveler, in the big trailer that we're showing, that the Bungie is showing and has done, where you see people going into the Traveler, and so like how do we get there? And this is explaining how we get there. It's just weird. Like, it's a weird thing that this is both not in the expansion, and like normally I would recommend playing the seasonal stories because they're usually pretty good and relatively easy. But this one is just like bizarre. It's like a weird thing of like the story I actually think is very well written, but it's just a weird, like super time consuming thing to do, especially for a person that likes to wait until they're done to go do them so you can actually play through the whole thing at once.
Yeah, that and like with the blind well thingy, even if you heroic it, you have to go through it twice for the quest step to get enough progress.
Yeah, it was just annoying. It's just like the kind of thing
so many.
I'm playing an activity I don't want to do just to complete a quest step, and I get maybe doing it once, but it's always too much. Like that's the thing, is it's always with Bungie's seasonal design, they always just go too far. Like it's you have to do too many things too many times, and I truly wonder why. Like I'm sure they're aware of this.
Well, they got to fill out content for the season. They got to make sure you don't finish all the content.
I have to imagine it's a thing they want to pad the numbers or something, but with playtime, I'm just like, that's strange. It's just a weird. Like I don't think this is making me play any more than I would. I'm thinking it's just making me more annoyed that I'm not doing the other things that I want to do. So
they're too terrified that you're gonna like stop playing, like halfway through the season or something.
But and they don't have to be. They have fun guns that I love to just shoot dregs with. In the EDZ, I will spend like hours a day thinking of something while I'm making a list or waiting for an appointment. I'm just like.
Well, especially when it
seems that explosion.
Like,
yeah, that's good.
And again, if I'm incorrect, you like please feel free to correct me, because it seems like I know a lot of people that play Destiny, and I keep hearing about aspects of their entire game that they have just ignored. Where, from what I understand, like PvP doesn't get a lot of new maps, Gambit, that kind of thing. It's like I feel like you could make things slightly less repetitive and really just fluff up these other aspects of your game that have been kind of.
I honestly, if Destiny did not get rid of seasonal content so readily at the end of the year, they would have a killer content offering.
Speaking of PvP stuff, so they did just release a new map pack for PvP. 3 new maps. You have something from Neomuna. You have like an arcade. You have a pyramid ship map, and you have a map on Europa. These maps are pretty cool. One big problem with them. at least from someone like me who is not that into PvP, you have to play them in a 3v3 game mode.
You have to play them in the 3v3 playlist that's also hyper sweaty occasionally.
It is
What?
insanely sweaty and competitive. It is an excruciatingly
It feels like
unfun
playing Halo
experience.
SWAT, basically. Like it feels like a SWAT playlist that I have to play these maps.
Like the fun Relax Crucible 6v6.
That makes me throw
There's
up,
a bunch
Ryan.
of Guardians. It's fun chaos because of the abilities and things like that. You're not being focused down by one vindictive ass.
No, but you guys don't understand. You guys don't understand. If they regularly added to Gambit in PvP, that would be over delivering, and that's just not something that's in Bungie's DNA anymore. That's just not something they can do. They have to under deliver so that they can, because they can't promise too much, guys. You know.
Yeah, we'll see about that because Vital Shape is promising a lot. So
it's promising a Taken King level of stuff, new subclasses, new.
It looks like Prismatic looks really fun. So all right, let's move on from Destiny because we've been talking about it for a little while.
Well,
I'll move on to Wyatt.
I've had a real great transition this whole time, and I've just been sitting on it.
Yeah.
Speaking of walking into rooms over and over again and fighting the same enemies over and over again, I've been playing Hades too.
That is a good transition.
But it's way less boring than it sounds. Yeah. So Hades won.
What did it win?
Big deal. It was my game of the year. It was game of the year for many people. Probably one of my favorite games of all time. I'm probably not alone in that camp either. The early access period for Hades 2 has begun as of earlier this week. And I've been playing a whole bunch of it. I think I have like 15 something hours.
And I'll specify for anyone worried, Wyatt's not going to spoil Hades 2.
No.
Or Hades 1. You're fine.
I am not going to say anything that hasn't been said in marketing and trailers. Okay? That is the extent of what I'm talking about. This game rocks.
I don't know what do you think about
I'm gonna get our F word out of the way for this episode. This game fucks. All right.
What do you think about the torch weapon, Wyatt?
Listen, I'll get there. I'm gonna get to the torch weapon. All right. But I want to talk about specifically the big changes. Because I feel like I've talked about Hades 1 a lot. I feel like in the past we've talked about Hades 1 a lot. I want to talk about the changes to combat specifically because I think they're very interesting, and I think it makes for a much more engaging kind of roguelike loop, right? The big thing is that there's just more options now, right? So you have your basic attack, which kind of depends on what weapon you're using, right? And then you also have your ranged attack, your I think it's your cast from the first game. But unlike the first game, you don't have a limited amount that like recharge. You can just fire off as many as you like. And you also have what in this game is called your cast, which is basically summoning a giant circle that kind of slows down enemies for a time, right? So all of these can be affected by different boons, and I'll get into those in a second. But you also have what's called the Omega version of each one of these attacks, right? So by holding down that associated button, you charge up your attack, and then it unleashes a bunch of extra damage or has a slightly different function. That uses up what's called magic. Magic, either you have to get up certain upgrades in order to like slowly refill your magic, or there's certain boons that can affect that as well, but that resets at the beginning of each encounter. There's also your hex, which is kind of like your call from the first game, kind of like your ultimate ability that you can only use when you've used enough magic, depending on which hex you get. So it really encourages you to use those Omega abilities as much as possible. I love this loop a lot. It's super addicting, and I think these changes to combat just lend themselves to much more interesting boons than what you got in the first game. Boons being the upgrade that you get at the end of an encounter. Because there's some wacky shit in this game. They go way further with it in this game than they did in the first one, which is really nice to see. I was showing you guys this crazy build I had the other night where one of the weapons you get is a giant axe, where if you hold down, if you use its Omega attack, you just do a giant swing and you just spin in a circle, and it's awesome. You can get a Daedalus boon that allows you to use your basic attacks and stuff while you're swinging. So you can just layer on a bunch of attacks all at the same time. And I also had a hex that slowed time down for like 10 seconds. And so you can just, if during a boss fight, you get like a moment where they're not really doing anything and they're just sitting there, you can stretch out those 2 seconds to 10 really slow seconds and just take a quarter of their health out in one go. And it's so satisfying. And it all feels really, really busted, but they always get you eventually. I feel like in terms of difficulty, it scales. Yeah, it gets too you get too cocky, but also like it just the difficulty scales really, really well. I feel like the boons just synergize a lot more here. Not that they didn't do a great job of that in the first game, but I feel like they take it a step farther. I feel like they're more confident with this this system this time around, and they're more confident in balancing some more wacky kind of builds, which is really nice to see. Yeah, that's the most exciting thing for me. I think all of your attacks kind of combo together really, really well, and I just think it makes for a more interesting loop. It's gonna be tough if I go back to play the first one again, which is a mark of a good sequel, in my opinion. If it's gonna be tough to go back to the previous games because of one feature or another, right? So all of that is great. Excellent. They've also added a ton of stuff outside of that too. There's like we were mentioning to Alex before we started, there is fishing in the first game, which is kind of fun. They've really expanded that now. There's tons of more tools, so you can like mine for different like minerals. There's digging for different seeds, and there's a whole garden that, excuse me, you can like grow different plants in. There's a giant cauldron where you got to throw all this stuff together and create different things that affect the each run that you go into and stuff, and it affects like the home base as well. And it's just much more expanded this time, and it feels more like a full-on crafting system than the first game did. Because they had a similar system in the first game, but I don't think it was quite as robust as it is here. Because you can only carry one tool with you at a time, so you have to prioritize: do I want a specific kind of rock from this area, or do I want to try and get a specific kind of like seed for like growing plants in this area and stuff? So you have to kind of prioritize.
Can you switch it out between areas, or is it a one per
once
run?
per run? But you can also use an item that will allow you to bring a familiar with you. So right now I have a frog named Freenos that can like block the occasional like ranged attack, which is nice. But he also has one of the tools with him that he can use once per run. So you can kind of like pick and choose which one you want. Yeah, all that is great. One thing that I'm like mostly sold on, but not 100%. And this is an early access state, so all of this is subject to change later on, of course. I think the story is good, but I'm not as immediately hooked as I was with the first one. It may just because it's a sequel, and I'm not, and so it doesn't wow me as much the first time. But I think the setup isn't quite as interesting, because the first game it's just such such an interesting dynamic of you're the son of Hades, you're trying to leave the underworld to go look for your mother, and when you die, you just come back to the Hall of Hades because you're the son of Hades and you're in hell. Who gives a shit anyway, right? It's cute and it's got this emotional core to it, and it's something you want to learn more about. With this one, it's good, but it's not quite as interesting. And I'm just going to say things that are relegated to trailers and stuff. But basically, you are playing as a witch who is trying to leave her like forest area, and she's going to kill Kronos essentially because she is holding your family captive. Your family being, Hades and Zagreus, right? And so you're off to go kill Kronos, the Titan of Time, right? Who's also mounting an attack on Olympus. So there's all these things happening, and it's
classic
not a
Greek
bad
mythology
setup.
story.
Classic Greek mythology stuff, but it's not as like.
Zagreus trying to escape has like a really, I think, relatable feeling to it. If it's almost like you're stuck at your parents' house and you want to get out, I think is like part of the intent. Whereas this is a little bit more fantastical.
Yeah, and it's a fun setup. I'm not going to say it isn't fun, and I like what they're doing, where Melenoe, the main character, has never met her family before, and so they're trying to do this whole like you've never met your family before. Why is this so important to you? Which I think they're going to extrapolate on a lot more They haven't yet, as far as I've gotten in the story, but I hope they do, because I feel like that's like a good core kind of inner conflict for the main character. They just haven't done too much with it yet. They're like dipping their toes in it, but they haven't quite really dove all the way in yet. I still think it's good. It's just not as immediately captivating. It's weirdly very similar to how I feel about God of War versus God of War Ragnarok, where both have really good stories. But Ragnarok is much bigger in scope, and I feel like it's missing a bit of that like
tightness,
heart and tightness that the first game has. That could totally change for this, but it's weird how like similar I'm feeling as I'm playing it.
I don't know if I know a series of games where the sequels don't feel like they have to go, or like they themselves don't feel like they have to go up in scale.
Yeah, they always have to kind
I wonder
of.
why that is.
I guess Uncharted, with the exception of like the set pieces getting bigger, I would say the story in terms of scope is kind of the same. I guess 4 is much smaller in scope, I would say, than the others.
It's more interpersonal, I think.
Yeah, because the other ones, it's like we got to save the world because this crazy warlord guy wants to get hold of this weird tree sap or something like that. But the fourth one is like, I just want to find treasure so I can help my brother, you know, and that worked perfectly for Uncharted 4. But yeah, I'm really digging it so far. I mean, needless to say, the voice acting, the absurd amount of writing that's all fully voiced, the music, the art style, the visuals, it's gorgeous. Just the screen where you select an upgrade is like one of the most gorgeous things I've ever seen in my entire life.
They know how to do UI.
It looks super cool.
It's such a gorgeous game. And I think they've gone even further with the amount of writing that's in this game. Like, it was fairly contextual in the first game, but this game has so many, like, it's crazy how you'll go into a boss fight and the first boss fight is she'll comment on how much health you have. Like, if you walk in and you're like you've taken pretty much no damage, the first boss will be like, oh, like not even a scratch.
I realized going through, I've been playing Hades 1 to try to catch up in that, because I've finished one run of Hades 1 run and then kind of put it down, but I still haven't finished the story. So I'm going back and like playing that to catch up to this. And I had a moment where like just realizing how awesome of a game Hades is. I ran into Than, who's one of the Thanatos, one of the characters you can run into for boons and stuff, or not boons, but like one of the events you can run into when you're doing a run. And he commented at the start because I was wearing the relic that he gives you. And it's like, oh, you're wearing my butterfly. If you just don't participate in this, you'll get stronger at the end because you won't take damage and I'll kill them all for you. And it was like, that's a really cool thing that he just like, because normally you're like trying to compete for kills and that when he shows up, he's like going to help you clear a room. But your goal is like a friendly competition to see who can beat more of them. But he's like, hey, just let me take care of this, and you'll get a buff from your flower or your butterfly pendant. And I was like, that's cool. That's acknowledged in the thing, even mechanically. So
something I didn't even know, because I'm not insane enough to try something like this. But if you do a run where you don't get a single boon, which I didn't even know was a thing you could do, but if you get to Hades in the first game without using a single boon, he will actually comment on that. He'll be like, oh, you don't have the stench of Olympus on you or anything. They thought that someone was going to try that. Some insane mad lad was going to do that.
Oh,
and
boy.
They paid the voice actor to make a comment about it. The amount of writing, and it probably helps that they don't have to do any like lip syncing, right? But still, you still have to write all this dialogue. You still have to have your actors like voice these things, which takes hours just to get a few usable takes sometimes. That's just how it goes with voice acting. It's like staggering. It's insanity. And everyone sounds just as like smooth as always. I don't know if it's the voice actors that they pick or something about the direction, but like everyone just has a certain way of talking in Supergiant games where someone explained this to me once and it's hilarious and I'm going to share it here. Every Supergiant character sounds hot. Not like not like it's an attractive
totally get
person
it.
talking.
They
but
sound
like,
attractive.
the sound of their voice, you're just like, this is so soothing. This is just so nice to listen to. And it's fantastic. I think for an early access game, there's so much content here. You can still do a full run in this game. And it's just in the early access period. There's so much content here. Genuinely, if they released it with a few exceptions, I think a lot of people, especially for people who haven't played the first game, they wouldn't even notice. I think they're off to a great start, and I at this point, Supergiant has a near perfect track record.
Mhm.
So I think the game is in capable hands, and I have no doubt that when 1.0 comes out, it's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what actually comes out.
Almost nothing but praise. This game is great. Go play it. It's only like $30 or something. Just go play it.
All right. Anything else about Hades 2?
No, just go play it.
All right, Alex.
It's wonderful.
What have you been sitting on? Hopefully a chair.
I've told all of you about this multiple times already. I'm back to torturing myself. I have talked everyone's ear
You already
off
talked about
Lies.
Destiny. Sorry. I'm sorry. I had to. I'm sorry.
Lies of P
Oh.
has instilled something in me, and it is a thirst for parrying. I started this game a while back, and then I got stuck on like 2 separate bosses that were very early in the game. And then the second day that I get back at it, or like now that now I'm to the final boss. I'm stuck on him, but I'm at the final boss. Sekiro. I realized I hadn't actually said the game until
Yeah.
Sekiro
we would
Shadows
figure
Die
that out
Twice
eventually and reminded you.
is
We would have got.
Oh my god, its parrying system very different from Lies of P. Still feels just as good. It's that sweet sword colliding sound.
It's the game that popularized it. Like, it's the one that got it right, and then everything's copied Sekiro since then. So,
but oh my god, that game is horrendously punishing. Dear God. If you don't know how to play it, you won't be able to at all. There's no cheese methods or anything. Your like your attack power and things. Like you can grind to get certain move sets. You can't grind to up your power or your health or everything. And there's not really optional bosses as far as they go. You need to fight like every boss in your path in order to, get your health up incrementally, get your attack power up incrementally, so that you're at the level that they expect you to be at for each boss fight.
Yeah.
And it's so grueling.
I feel like with Sekiro, whenever I hear people talk about it, it's either, yeah, it's good, just not my thing. But if it is their thing, it's like their favorite Souls-like. is typically what I've found.
Yeah. That was kind of my experience with it. Is I really like Sekiro, but bounced off of it a little bit at a very specific boss, which Alex knows, Guardian Ape. Just because that boss doesn't really follow the rules of the rest of the game. So you kind of hit a point with it where I was like, I love the parrying. I don't want to deal with this.
Well, I guess Lady Butterfly started that trend, but Guardian Ape really got the trend rolling of, okay, we up until this point we had been showing you all the different health bars the bosses have been having before. Just kidding. There's more hidden phases. Screw you.
Is
and then
Sekiro...
they get so much more difficult after that because they change up their moveset wildly and have like increased not fatigue, stun meter, stamina meter,
like poise meter.
Poise meter. There's not technically stamina in the game because you can just infinitely run, and things like that, which is nice. They change up mechanics from typical Souls-like games pretty well, so that it's refreshing for someone who's played like Dark Souls or Elden Ring or things like that.
Is Sekiro the last game that FromSoft had made before Elden Ring, or did Dark Souls 3 come after?
Dark Souls
Sekiro
3
was
was-
after
Dark Souls 3 is
3.
after, I think.
Because it's
Really?
interesting how in between, you know,
I might be wrong.
Sekiro.
it's kind of interesting how in between like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, they have been experimenting with this formula both in a very linear
Absolutely,
fashion.
I'm wrong. Dark Souls 3 was before.
Okay. Well, then this makes my point even more. That it's really interesting how they've been playing around with this Souls-like formula, where they made Sekiro, which is way more linear, from what I understand, than like their
Yes.
other Souls-likes, and then
Yeah.
Elden Ring, which is the exact opposite. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Metal Wolf Chaos was the next thing.
Of course.
Yep.
Metal Wolf. Oh my god.
That was announced at a. Wasn't that announced at a
Devolver
Digital?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was a good time.
Those mad lads.
Well, also Armored Core 6, I guess. Did that wait? No.
That's
Armored Core 6
after
was
Elden Ring.
After Elden
That's
Ring. Right?
after Elden Ring. Yeah, that's the newest thing they've done. Sweet. All right. Any other stuff you wanted to talk about with Sekiro, or is that your Sekiro pilling experience?
Are there specific questions about Sekiro? I usually do better talking.
I think we've talked about a lot of Sekiro stuff. I mean, how has the story been for you? I think that's a good question with Sekiro because it's a little bit more story heavy than the rest of
it
the
is,
Souls
and
games.
it's nice and it's out there. It's pretty much to the story level of Lies of P as far as how upfront they put it. It still has some weird mystical elements and things that aren't explained, or things that are not that are sort of like half and half in item descriptions and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're like optional vendor dialogue that's out of the way or hidden. But it's still dialogue. I do have to switch it back and forth from the Japanese dub and English sub sometimes, because they speak really nice and slow. I need to find a way to make the text size bigger so that I can read it. And the English voice acting is fine. Japanese voice acting is superb for it, though.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm glad that the story is hitting. It's very cool from what I remember.
I believe I'm going for the quote unquote best ending, I think, which I guess I can't talk about for spoiler reasons.
Well, I'm excited to hear outside of the
that you can
podcast
get.
if you get the best one or not, or if you think it's the best one.
I think I can't really screw it up now. There's not really a "you've died too many times" stipulation for endings, so I think that's fine.
Right. All right. I got another one to mention that Alex, you and I have also been playing a little bit together, a very small amount. ESO. Elder Scrolls Online. Alex and I have been booting this up occasionally because they're running a thing right now where if you log in 3 times in the month of May, you get a cool house that you can decorate to your heart's content. And so I went in and logged in and got that over a couple of days. And that led to us just doing a dungeon randomly. And I just want to mention, like, ESO's got a cool vibe. That's really what what I mention it here to say. Because I think I've kind of stopped thinking about ESO as an MMO, and that sort of made me appreciate it more.
And to be clear, I don't think you mean that as an insult at all.
Yeah, like I don't think ESO is trying to compete with like WoW or Final Fantasy 14 right now. I'd put it more in the territory of like a Guild Wars 2 or something trying a little bit more different. And I think the thing that I was just having fun with is it's a good way to adventure in the world of Tamriel and like Nirn and see a lot of that world in a way that's fun, because ESO's got phenomenal environmental design. Their art teams do so good, and I think it has much more freedom of movement than basically any other MMO aside from Guild Wars 2, where you can just move around the environment a lot more capably.
Yeah, there aren't like the set paths that you can only walk along.
And I think a lot of it, especially with ESO, that really helps with that is the fact that the leveling is not important. It's very much a like you do gain power and gain new abilities as you get a higher level, but anyone can really do any part of the game that's not a challenge piece of content. And the world scales to where you're at. So I think it's been really fun just playing through and seeing some of that stuff. And like we ran a dungeon together where we had my companion to heal us, and we're doing a like dungeon run of a low stakes starter dungeon. It was just a fun time. It's a neat little way to do things. And I think it brings some of that like old school vibe that MMOs had, where it was less like LFG focused and more just, oh, you're adventuring with your buds. And I think that's a cool thing to have when other MMOs exist, right? Like I think it's a very different space to exist in.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason. I think that's part of the reason ESO, because they had a really rocky launch and first few years.
Yes,
because it was a little bit, quality and stuff kind of dipped, and it had peaks and valleys.
You had some
it
really good
launched
voice actors and not much that they were doing.
Yeah, and it also
is
launched
sort of
as
Elder
a
Scrolls
subscription-based MMO with a $60 price tag and bunch of microtransactions and stuff. But I think part of the reason it's been able to stick around so long is that it fills a very specific niche that I think a lot of other MMOs don't. In that I think it doesn't go quite as hardcore as other MMOs do, but you can still really, sink your time into it if that's something you want to do.
I'd say a big part of that is that ESO, if I log back into Final Fantasy XIV, which is a game I love and will probably keep playing until they stop making it, when I log back into that after taking a break for a month or so, I have to like remember how to play the game. I have to go through and like relearn my controls and everything. ESO is pretty simple. Like ESO, you log in, you have a hotbar, you maybe have 2 small ones with a very low number of things to press, and you can just kind of do it. Like it's not that hard to get a grasp of. And not to say that there's not that like there isn't a lot of build craftiness in ESO, because you definitely can get very noodly and make some really cool in-game builds for the super challenging content. But if you're not doing that, you can totally just kind of exist in whatever you want. Like run around with the bear if you want the bear ultimate, or I remember partway through that my main character is a werewolf, and turned into a werewolf and was like, what's happening?
Ooh, what does this button do?
What does this button do? And realized, oh, I'm a werewolf with no abilities. Now I'm getting murdered. So,
oh no.
You did get to eat people's hearts, though.
I did get to eat people's hearts. It was a good time. But yeah, just a fun game to run through, especially because the classes are very freeform in that you can use your class skills or your weapon skills or your quest skill lines.
That's true, and you can mix and match. I was looking through my players' abilities, and I'm just like, okay, I'm like a dragon knight thingy.
Yeah.
But I can mix and match from like, oh, there's like a like Terra Magica knight or things like that, or just like a beast tamer thing that I can pull skills from and mix and match with, like,
yeah, there's tons of cool stuff you can do. Because like my ultimate is the werewolf ultimate, which comes from being a werewolf, and it's a whole different skill tree that I get access to. So yeah, it's just fun going through and like how much of an exploration focus it takes, and I think how low commitment it is. I think you can play ESO as a very high commitment game, just because there are a lot of systems that are more commitment heavy. Of like you could do things like upgrading your horse every single day if you care so much about getting all your horse stats maximized and things like that. But they're things that like really don't affect you that much, and are pretty easy to do. So yeah,
and
it's
really,
just fun to go through.
Is it a real video game if it doesn't have horse stats? That's my question.
Is it a real video game if it doesn't have horse armor?
Hey, there you go.
Great thing to say.
Go.
Yeah, I can recommend checking out ESO for their new login thing for the house is neat, just because you get a really cool like big space.
And then after that, the rest of the rewards are loot boxes.
If you want some free loot boxes, feel free to continue logging in. But yeah, the house is neat, and it's only 3 days. So heavily recommend doing that if you're watching this in the month of May of 2024 and want a free ESO house. Yeah, moving on from ESO. Anyone have another game they want to mention? I know, Wyatt, you've got something for us.
I do. This is less of a game and more of a moose-boosh of smaller independent titles. I got this adorable little thing.
Sorry, I'm not paying attention to you because I'm cranking. So
how dare you?
What? Really, Ryan? You're cranking one out on the podcast?
Okay, I'm not gonna grace that with a response.
I feel like every time we talk about this, it's just gonna get weird.
It's gonna get crank jokes, and
and Playdate jokes. Apparently, Ryan.
It's called the Playdate. It wasn't
You're
trying to make
having
a
a Playdate
joke.
with
It's just
yourself.
the name of the console.
Well, anyway, this is the Playdate. This is by publisher Panic, who's done a lot of I think Mac OS apps, but they also publish games and stuff like that. It's this adorable little handheld gaming unit, very lo-fi. This thing is built like a frickin' tank. I just want to say it may look kind of cheap if you're just looking at it on camera. This thing's solid. It's dense. All right, it is heavier than it looks. But I've been playing a bunch of little games recently because the best part about this is you get 2 games for 2 games per week for 12 weeks. And so it has a bunch of built-in games already, but it also has an entire catalog. It has an entire store. And you just get a bunch of these cute little games. Prices range from, like a few bucks to I think the most expensive is like $12. Something like that.
The most expensive I saw in the store.
And it just has, I say this lovingly, I think this is where all the good mobile games went. And I say that in the best way possible because there have been some great mobile games over the years. Like Monument Valley is great, Device 8 is great, Her Story is great, if you've ever played those before, all great. But they're simple, addictive loops that have a twist to it that really makes them more deceptively simple than anything else. And I think that's the kind of games that this thing excels at. For instance, I've been playing, I think my new obsession when I'm not in front of the PC is Space Rat Miner, which is a little mining roguelike game where you're just mining down, you're picking up gems to spend on permanent upgrades, and you have to watch your oxygen, you have to use the oh yeah, forgot to mention, there's a little crank on this thing. That's one of its
that's the main thing. That's the big
forms
thing
of input. Honestly, I think the crank, as cool as it is, I don't think it's the coolest thing about the device, which is just the overall personality of it, which I think kind of is what the crank is a part of. But,
the boot up screen that you showed earlier.
This thing has so much a Nintendo console charm, if that makes sense. It has these charming little sounds, and it has just so much character to it. But you gotta in this game you gotta charge up your little drill using the crank. You gotta watch your oxygen. There's lava that falls down from the screen, and it's simple, but it's well made. Some really nice pixel art, some fun music, and it's just so addicting. For instance, another game that I'm going to talk about in a bit, Star Wars Battlefront 2, the newer one. I've been playing that since I'm still on a bit of a almost dropped it. Oh, fully dropped it. Okay.
Perfect.
Butterfingers. But sometimes because the player base is a little low, that game makes you wait a little bit to get into matches. So while it's finding a new match of, Supremacy or something, pull out this little guy, and you do a couple of rounds of, Whitewater Wipeout or something while you wait for another game. If you're like me, and your brain cannot stay stagnant for more than a second because it's been ruined by ADHD forever.
Because it's so just neat and tidy and pocket size, is it ever tempting to bring it into work?
Oh, I have. I don't use it during work. I use it on my break. If anyone from work is literally, I'm on my feet. There's no way. I'd have to walk up and down the bar where I work. Just yeah, I'll be with you in just a second.
It's sneaking in some Space Rat Miner as you're.
But no, I think the community surrounding the games that you find on these things is great too. It's a bunch of smaller development teams that are just really passionate about creating games for a platform that's very limiting. It's not even a color screen. It's
limiting, and people making games for this know they're not turning a profit. They might if it's a very simple game be able to break even, but it's definitely, if you're making a game for this thing, it's out of passion and just wanting to do it as a neat little thing.
Yeah. You can also sideload things from itch.io if there's something that's compatible with Playdate, all for free, and it's done. You can do it very, very easily. Probably one of the easiest sideloading processes that I've ever seen. Yeah, it's just from the console itself to the games, everything about it is just made with love. like their whole marketing, even on the back of the box for this thing, which is also equally adorable, is like, we made this thing for fun. If you listen to their podcast, they talk about how originally this was supposed to be a cute little watch to represent their 15th anniversary. That's what this started as, which is kind of ironic because on the lock screen it does have a little clock. But it kind of morphed into this whole other thing, and it took them so long to make that it then released as their 20th anniversary, because that's how long it took them to develop it, because it just kept ballooning in scope. And that's just what they wanted it to be, was this cute little celebration of Panic as a studio. And now it's become a whole platform for just like passionate, like made with love indie games. And I think especially given recent events in the games industry, I think being a part of a community like that feels really, really nice.
A really good, I think, unequivocally positive thing in a industry full of turmoil and bad right now.
I think,
so,
I'm not gonna lie, I think part of my love of this device right here is that it arrived on my doorstep the day that stuff started going down. And so it was just nice to immerse myself in something, in an ecosystem that felt so wholesome and was just filled with passion.
People making games because they had little fun concepts that they wanted to make, and not.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about the Playdate, is it is all about that.
Profit.
Yeah, I think the main thing too is, like, if you're going to develop for this thing, you want to develop it because it has this crazy ass crank on the side
that no other console has.
That no other console has, and let me tell you, this crank feels wonderful.
I mean, one of the thing about the Playdate as like a developer is Playdate is like, this thing is a wacky thing to make something for. Like, it's got tons of limitations. You can't do like impressive, powerful graphics generally. You're just making a cool little thing to go on this cool little box that goes in a pocket somewhere. And it has a lot of challenges with it, but like, I think a lot of developers and especially designers work really well under a degree of constraint of like, you have a limit to what you can actually achieve, so you work within that limit to do something really cool. And I think that's absolutely where a lot of Playdate games come from. So
many studios have become complacent with Unreal 5 Engine's ability to not have to make a low poly model.
Although I will say, for as lo-fi as a lot of this is, there's still been some incredible 3D work done with this thing.
Absolutely.
Like, considering what you're working with, there are full 3D environments and models that I've seen on this thing with just 2 colors, and they look great.
What was the one that you were showing earlier? Wasteland Braver or something like that? That was
I was.
Those are some phenomenal designs.
Yeah, check it out on this game's development. It's a weird tech demo thing, Waste Braver.
Waste Braver.
It's called. That is currently in process. It's a neat little Playdate thing. And there's a tech demo for it that's really cool. And there's tons of art of this game if you go to look it up. But Waste Braver looks really, really cool. It's launching on Steam and hopefully the Playdate catalog at some point. The Playdate catalog is very, very well curated, which is another thing we hadn't talked about. Is everything on there has to go through like an approval process with Playdate and Panic to make sure it's working good and it's like a quality thing. And that means that, like, if you're looking at things on that store, there's a degree of quality that you can know minimum is going to be there. Like, minimum, it's going to function and be good to some degree. Like, maybe a lot of Playdate games are very short and very small and like score chasing games, which I think is, if you're not into those games, this console is a little bit harder of an ask because it is a little expensive and it does primarily cater to like those pocket-sized games, but it's a pocket-sized device. Like, you toss it in your pocket, you play a little bit of a game. Like, I think Wyatt and I both talked about Whitewater Wipeout. And that game is, like, incredibly simple. It is literally, you just crank. You use the crank and it spins a surfboard. But that said, it's incredibly addictive. It's one of those things where, like, I think I have spent truly an amount of time in that game that shouldn't be stated. Like, I think I have over, like, 2 hours in that, like, 10-second loop. And that comes with the console. It's one of the free games that you get in the first week, and there's tons of others. And yeah, most of them are only like an hour long, or maybe a little bit more than that if they're more of an RPG thing. But that's totally fine.
And I think too, this solves a conundrum that mobile gaming has had for such a long time, right? Because with mobile games, and I'm specifically talking about games on your phone, right? Where's my phone?
Yeah.
I don't
You
know
got
where
games
it is.
on your phone?
Well, here's the thing. I used to be really into mobile games, right? Because they were there, they were in your pocket. They were usually, simple, well executed things that use the touchscreen well, right? But then people realized that you could just make the most disgusting gotcha garbage and make tons of money. And that's what the App Store has become. And part of the problem with that is that people don't want to pay money for games on their phone. Even if it's a really good, like $3, $4 game. They're like, what? I don't want to spend money on a game on my phone. What are you talking about? This solves that problem where you are buying a video game console. So you have no qualms with buying $4 video games that are fun, that will eat up that time while you're waiting for the bus or something. And people weren't willing to do that with their phone, which I can kind of understand. But that's why the mobile game market on your smartphone is what it is because no one wants to actually spend money on the
But
game.
it
They
used to be
just want
better
the free
though.
stuff. It did.
What
It did.
happened?
Because they realized that they didn't have to do that. And also there were games that I'll never not tell this story, right? I'm going off on a tangent. I apologize, but I have to do this. Everyone has heard of the game 2048, right?
Mhm.
That like sliding tile
Yeah.
game, right? Here's the thing. I think Ryan knows where I'm going with this. Here's the thing. I want to say I don't know the timeline exactly, but before 2048, there's this game called Threes. Threes is one of the best mobile games ever made.
It's great, really good.
In my opinion. It is 2048, but slightly more complicated and has so much charm. It is all of the little numbers have their own little voice actors and little faces, little personalities. It's got this banging soundtrack, this one song looping in the background that's great, super catchy. It's got a great look to it. And $3 is all they were asking for this great little mobile puzzle game. 2048 comes along sometime later, sucks out all of the personality, all of the depth, makes it free to play, cloned 1,000 times. No one's ever heard of Threes. And it breaks my heart every time I think about that story because Threes was genuinely a labor of love. And I think for games like Three, if you're someone who wants to make a mobile game, just do it for this because I think the App Store or the Google Play Store or whatever, I think it's a lost cause at this point. Genuinely. Unless you're paying for that like Apple Arcade thing, which has a bunch of curated, from what I understand, really, really good mobile games that like are Apple curated or whatever. Just make it for the Playdate instead. I think all of the real like interesting mobile games, I think you're gonna find them on this, genuinely.
Yeah,
Because
I
this
think
is
it's
not
definitely true.
this is not the community where someone makes Threes and then someone else rips it off and makes it free and then everyone forgets about it. That's not the kind of community this is, and that's what's so wonderful about it. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Good TED Talk. All right. Well, I think we hit upon the major things I want to talk about this episode. Does anyone have other stuff they want to mention before we close out? I've got one or two
like
things. Really
yeah,
One more.
but
real quick. Been replaying Star Wars Battlefront 2, both the old one and the new one, because I'm still on a Star Wars kick from Star Wars Day. I think at this point both are good. I think both scratch slightly different itches. To be honest with you, I like the new one. I like the battle point system. It's interesting. The vehicles are jank as fuck and they're kind of obnoxious. And the old one is also jank because it's kind of old, but also, goddamn, is it still so much fun.
yeah. Alex, did you have something?
I don't know if I've talked about this before, but I will again. Still playing Submachine, the Submachine Legacy series on
Fantastic.
Steam. That was the wonderful Flash game series created by an indie developer. On that was a browser game before. It's got that good crack open a notepad type puzzle solving stuff that I yearn for.
Perfect.
Beautiful.
Playdate would be a good console for you, Alex. That's a feeling that Playdate does well. I want to mention a couple of games because there's a few indie games that just came out, most of which I haven't played because they all came out at the same time. Heavily recommended. Thousand Resist from Brett, which is a like sci-fi narrativist visual novel thing. Very cool. Next to that, Rabbit and Steel, which is a game emulating Final Fantasy XIV style of raiding in 2D with rabbits and a roguelike. And I'm gonna have to buy it after this because I absolutely can't wait. And Alex, I'm probably gonna end up sending you a copy at some point, so you can raid. In this little
I must raid. I must raid.
Yeah, looks really cool.
I have no thumbs and I must raid.
I have no thumbs yet. I must raid. And then V Rising just hit 1.0, which is super cool survival game.
Oh yeah.
Top down, made by Stunlock, who made Battle Right, which is by far my favorite like arena MOBA that has ever existed. It's very dead now. It's not a lot of players, but V Rising is the same combat system, just converted into a more like PvE or PvP if you play on a public server and want to do PvP. Vampire themed survival game with really cool bosses and fun powers and all that. Just a lot of content. Very, very cool system. It has fun base building and a Castlevania crossover.
Yeah. You can fight Simon Belmont, I think, right?
Yes, you can. And that's not even part of the crossover. I think that's part of the base game.
Oh my god. I love the idea of like it's base building, but it's not like your typical wooden or stone shack. You're building a vampire castle.
No, you're building a vampire castle. You're gonna make a sick vampire castle. Absolutely. Great game. That one I've been heavily enjoying. Little Kitty Big City.
Yes.
Also just came out. That's just on Game Pass. It's a fun time. I've been having fun just running around in it. And I'd actually say there's more here than I thought there would be. I figured this would be a relatively simple game, but
they call it Big City. They don't call it that for nothing.
Yeah, it's simple. It reminds me a lot of like a Katamari or something along those lines. It's relatively low stakes, just fun. Animations for the cat are phenomenal. Love it so much. Yeah.
It reminds you of Cat Amare?
All right, moving on. Crow Country is another game that just came out that's very much on my list to play at some point, which is a early Resident Evil inspired third-person survival horror, but with super tunable like difficulty and whatnot and how it functions. So you can play it with like the classic tank controls. You can make it more modern. You can change how like saving works and whatnot. Just lots of things that would be more aggravating in some of these older games. But you can play this in that style, or you can tune it to be whatever you want. Very cool, very fun. I've heard Brett has mentioned that he's having a great time with it, so heavily recommended from him. Animal Well. Animal Well is the first game published by Big Mode, made by Billy Basso from single developer. This is the Donkey publishing studio, Donkey and Leah, and apparently it's excellent. From everything I'm hearing, absolutely intend to pick this up at some point. It's like a non-combat Metroidvania thing. Yeah, seems super cool.
Billy Basso is an insane person. He made an entire graphics engine on his own for this game. For his little one-man army. Jesus Christ.
Oh, it was great. All right, that's the rapid fire. I think with that, that's everything we wanted to talk about today, except for shout-outs. So who's got a shout-out?
Shout out to
looking around.
Yeah, I actually don't have anything prepared. I usually have something prepared. Shout out to I'm gonna say it again. Shout out to the box that the Playdate comes in. It's so cute, and it's just got a little thing on the back, and that's it. And it's designed to be on your bookshelf, and you can just lay it like that in your bookshelf. And that's exactly what I'm gonna be doing. So
yeah, great. I want to say shout out to travel batteries. This is a weird one, but I realized I got a flight to Japan in a week. along with those lines, podcast is going to be on break for 2 weeks because I will be in Japan and unable to do the podcast because I'll be in Japan. So that's the just for those 2 weeks. But I was like, I need a battery because I am basically only going to have my phone and probably my Switch there and want to have the ability to survive a 16-hour plane flight. So shout out to Anchor for coming through.
Yes, dude, they make absolute tanks of
I could bludgeon somebody
batteries.
with this brick.
Oh my god.
Yes,
that's a murder weapon.
Dude, they're Anchor with power with like battery banks. They ain't messing around. They ain't messing.
They know what they're doing.
That's why it's called Anchor. Oh my god.
I also use their earbuds and their like wireless earbuds, and
they aren't as heavy, right?
No, you can still bludgeon someone with them though.
Yeah, separate use case, but you can go for it.
Yeah, double whammy, 2 birds with 1 stone, or 1 earbud.
Yeah. All right, Alex, you got anything to close us out from that?
Yeah. Shout out to grapefruit juice. It's good.
Nice and simple. I like it.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. Who doesn't love some grapefruit juice?
All right. As always, podcasts on Tuesdays, whenever you find them on the store, wherever you listen to podcasts, just kind of at a time during the day. We're going to be gone for a couple weeks. We'll see you afterwards for talking about some Fallout games that we've been playing. That'll be a fun time in honor of the Fallout TV show being pretty cool. That's it. That's the show.